Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome to chapter 9.3. We're doing the second part today. Second part today is dealing with box and whiskers plots. Now in box and whiskers plots, you're going to be asked to do several things. So I don't know if you're familiar with a box and whiskers plot is, but basically it's a line plot that has a little box drawn and then there's little, what are called the whiskers sticking out of it. So you'll see when we get to it. So your instructions are to create a box and whiskers plot. Second thing is you need to determine the interquartile range. We'll discuss what the interquartile range is. More than anything, the interquartile range is also called the IQR, okay? And then the third thing is that you need to draw a conclusion based on the information that you've used and what you've created. So first example says minutes spent on homework. So you've been given the number of minutes, 15 minutes, 83 minutes, 75, 12, 19, 74, and 21. So we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 data pieces, okay? So this is an odd number. So the box and whiskers plot differs a little bit on how to obtain the information you need based on odd number of data pieces and even. So I'm gonna label this as odd so you remember how to do your steps. Now, in order to create a box and whiskers plot, you need 5 things. This is called the 5-number summary. 5-number summary means you need the least value, you need the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the greatest value. And I'll explain step by step what each one means, okay? So basically a box and whiskers plot is cut into quarters, so to speak. But you won't see that until we finish everything, and then I'll show you where the quarters are at. So in order to get our values and get all our information, you cannot do it the way it is listed there. You have to put, sorry guys, you have to put your data set in order from least to greatest. So least to greatest, our values are 12, and then after that is 15, then 19, after that is 21, 74, then 75, and last 83. Okay, so order them from least to greatest. Now, in order to start filling the information, the least value is the easy one, 12, and the greatest value is also easy. Okay, now since we have odd number of data, that means that in the middle, remember we've got 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. That means the fourth number, which is 21, is the median. So the median is also, in a way, easy to do. Now the first quartile basically is the median of the first half of the data, not including that middle number when it's odd, okay? So what is the median on this side of the data? The middle number is 15, so there's no calculation other than, sort out the data, inshallah. So first quartile is 15. Now the third quartile is exactly the same thing, but on the opposite end of the data. So on the opposite end of the data, the median is that value of 75, okay? So 75 is our third quartile. So again, when it's odd numbered, take out the middle value when you're trying to determine your first and your third quartile. You're gonna see in a minute how it changes when you've got even number of data. So, inshallah, you found this easy to get. Now, how do we create our box and whiskers plot? We're going to basically plot all these points. We're going to draw dots. Now, don't graph them on the line. Graph them a little bit above the line. So, estimate where 12 is at. And I'm not going to, measure exactly, but it has to be relatively in the correct place. So, 12, I'm going to estimate it to be right there. And then the next number is 15. So, make sure that there's going to be a little crowding to begin with. The next value is 21, which is really close to it. Okay? The next value is 75. So locate 75. And then the last value is 83. Estimate where 83 is at. And now to create your box with whiskers. The whiskers, guys, are basically the first ends. Okay? So the first 2 dots, the last 2 dots, those are the whiskers. The box basically goes from the second point all the way to the fourth point. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna draw a box. It's going to come down this way. Draw a box all the way across, and then a line where the median is at. So notice if you have a box with whiskers, even though this whisker is a little on the short side, this whisker is on the longer side, okay? Now for box and whiskers plots, you must have titles as well. So you need the person that's reading it to understand what are they reading. So we're talking about homework. And in reference to homework, what are we talking about? Minutes, right? So number of minutes can go on the bottom. So the first thing that you have done is you've created your box and whiskers plot, okay? Now the second thing was determine the IQR. Now the IQR is the interquartile range. And we learned from the previous lesson that range is the difference from the greatest to the least, but don't confuse it in this. The range, if we're just talking range in general, it's the least and the greatest value. But we're not talking about range, we're talking about interquartile range. That means the range of the box. Only the box, not the whiskers. So what you can do is use the data set right here. Remember, this second point right here is the 50, which is the first quartile. And this second to the last data piece is the third quartile. So we can say that our IQR is basically 75 minus the 15, okay? And 75 minus 15 is equal to 60 minutes, okay? So first answer is the box and whiskers plot. Second answer is the IQR. And I know that I'm crowding a lot on one board, but what can I do, guys? The board is small. Now, the conclusion. So the conclusion, you base it on the visual that you have. So what kind of statements can you make about the conclusion? So let's first understand, remember that I said in the beginning, I'm going to explain what 25% is in each part of the box and whiskers and how the whole thing makes 4 quarters. So the first 2 points, believe it or not, is 25% of the data, a quarter of the data. The next 2 points, which is the first part of the box and the median, make the next 25%. Then the next 25% is from the median all the way to the third quartile. And then the last quarter, 25%, is the third quartile to the greatest value. So you have 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then the 4th quarter, which makes up the whole box and whiskers plot. So when you're drawing a conclusion, you're drawing a conclusion based on the visual that you see. Now understand that from the median on upwards, that's the upper part of the graph. From the median backwards is the lower end. So in the conclusion here, we can say that the top 50% of the data, so from the median to the last whisker over here, which is the greatest value, the little dot, right? The last dot. The 50% of the upper half of the data is more spread out, okay, than the first or the lower or bottom. It just depends what word you want to use. So what I'm going to go ahead and say, my conclusion, top 50% of the data is more spread out than bottom 50%. Now, if you want to reverse it the other way around and say that the lower or the bottom 50% of the data is not spread out as much as the top part of the data, that's fine too. But it just needs to make sense according to the box and whiskers plot that you draw. So now let's go ahead and now work on what happens when the data is an even number of data pieces. So here we have another word problem. So it says amounts earned babysitting, and the amounts are $75, $61, $88, $79, $79, $99, $63, $77. You still need your 5 data pieces, right? Your 5-number summary, that's what it's called. And first thing you need to do, remember that I said you must order it from least to greatest. So if you order it from least to greatest, we're going to take 61. The next number is 63. And then the next number, and of course you can cross out as you go. 75, then 77, then 79, 79, and then 88, and 99. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Always count, guys. Always count, because many times you might lose count of or control of one of the values. So remember, this is even. There is a slightly different way, but it's the same concept. So obviously, the greatest and the least value are the easy ones to get because they're in order now. So the least value is 61. The greatest value is 99. Now let's determine the middle value and the first quartile and the third quartile. So since there's 8 pieces of data, that means that the data can be evenly split right down the middle. So my median happens to be between 77 and 79. So what's the value between 77 and 79? Obviously it's 78. But I still have to teach you, what if the numbers were not, this easy? What if it was 103 and then 217 or something like that, right? So what you would do for the median, and I'm just going to use these numbers, 77 plus 79, you add them up and you should get 156. Since I'm adding 2 numbers, divided by 2, and then 156 divided by 2 gives you that 78. So here we are with our least value, our greatest value, and our median. Now, how do we deal with the upper quartile or the first quartile? Now, the first quartile is going to come from the first half of the data, okay? So we need to find the value that's right in the middle of the data and right in the middle of these 2 numbers, okay? So what do? We're going to do 63 plus 75. 63 plus 75 gives you 138. Divided by 2, it gives you 69. So here's our other value, 69. Sorry. All right. Now, same thing happens to the other side. The third quartile is the median between these 2 numbers. The number that falls right in the middle. How do we figure that out? 79 plus 88. So 79 plus 88, it's equal to 167 divided by 2. And of course, you're using a calculator with this, guys, okay? You get 83.5. Okay? So hopefully you understood that. Median is right in the middle. You split the data in half. When you're finding the first quartile or the third quartile, don't exclude any values. Go into the middle values, you add them up and divide by 2. Okay? Now, we've got the information ready to go. So the greatest value, or rather, I don't know why I wrote greatest. This should be the least. I know that if I was in class, you all would have said, Miss Idan, you wrote the wrong thing. Anyways, the least value is 61. So come on your graph. And remember, it's floating a little bit above. Estimate where it's at. 61. The first quartile is 69. Estimate where 69 is at. The next is the median, which is 78. 78 is about right there. The next value, which is the third quartile, is 83.5. Estimate where 83.5 is at. I'm going to estimate it to be about right there. And then the last value is 99, which is way out here. Remember, I said the last 2 and the first 2 are your whiskers. The box comes from the middle 3. So there is your box and whiskers. Now, what do we need to make sure that we have? we need to make sure that it has a title. The title, I'm going to call it Baby Sitting Earnings. And then below it, we can say amount. And I can indicate that we're talking about dollars. Now, we're talking about IQR. So the IQR, remember that we said it's going to be the third quartile minus the first quartile, right? So I'm gonna squeeze it up here, guys. So IQR, and I'm gonna box it so you know what I'm doing. The IQR is basically 83.5 minus your first quartile, which is 69. And what's 83.5 minus 69? You should get $14.50. So my IQR is $14.50. Now, what can I say as far as my conclusion is concerned? My conclusion is, now I know that the data is spread out a little bit more on this, but it's not greatly spread out. So as opposed to the previous one where I said the upper half or the top part, the upper 50% of the data is more spread, I'm just gonna say the upper 50% of the data is slightly spread out more than the bottom 50%. All right, so if you need me to write that down, we'll say that, and I'm gonna put it right here. So upper 50% of data is slightly more spread out than bottom 50%. Okay? So upper 50% of data is slightly more spread out than the bottom 50%. And I don't know if you can see that 50%, but it's there, guys. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to come to class. Inshallah, I'll answer anything that you need. And hopefully you found the lesson to be easy, inshallah. See you in class. Assalamu alaikum.